Hey friends, welcome to the Panda Award Show. I'm Ben.
And I'm Ubby, and the two of us are your hosts for this podcast.
How you been?
Oh, I've been pretty good. Can't complain. The world's moving along. What about yourself?
Yeah, man, it's been good. Got recording on Juneteenth, so got a little day off and some time to get this one out.
Yeah, yeah. I have a lot of people that have been like, I didn't know the bank was closed today. And I was like, yeah, well, federal holiday. So Ben, we're new to this. This is our first episode that we're recording. Why? Why did we start this? What is the point of this podcast?
Gosh, yeah, I kind of had this idea in the back of my head for a while that I listen to a lot of podcasts. Like there are a lot of podcasts that I love
Yeah.
out there. I used
Yep.
to travel for work, so I'd listen to like hours of content
Nothing
like
better than
daily.
6 hours of podcast on the plane, right?
Yeah, I mean, you'd be going New York, California, and you got 3 hour flight, and there's nothing to do but sit there and listen to a podcast. So,
Yep.
one of the gaps that I saw was kind of in the career aspect, right? Because I had my really technical podcasts, like the PowerShell podcast and things like that, and then I really love like I'll shut them out. The Humanize IT podcast I really
Oh
like.
yeah, good one.
I really like their stuff, and yeah. And there's a lot of stuff for MSP owners, but there's not much for the techs in MSPs or in internal IT to really talk about their career and kind of figure out, where they want to go. And the other thing that I've always really enjoyed is talking to people and diving into their stories. It's been something that even if I wasn't recording it or doing it for a podcast, how did you get here exactly? And most of the time when I ask somebody, they say, well, it's a weird story.
Every single time it's weird, and I feel like we should readjust what weird means. It seems like weird's the new normal.
I think weird's the normal. I mean, I've seen art degrees, engineering guys, like all walks of life.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and I love what you said about there being some really great podcasts out there. It's you know I think both of us come from pretty technical backgrounds, and there's so many podcasts and there's so much content out there that lets us learn more about whatever task or job we need. Packet pushers has always been a favorite of mine. Figuring out the latest and greatest new thing about networking technologies. Like I don't have the time to read all of the articles. It's good to have someone summarize some of that. But there was never anything to teach me just what should I do? What's my next step in my career? How do I
Yeah.
go from where I am today to, making more money, having more responsibility, doing cooler things? What did it take to get there? And that was always been the hardest part. And I think that's one of the reasons we want to start this. It's to get the next generation to to learn more, right? It's to increase their career, to understand what the IT career path is. You mentioned MSPs, and for a lot of people I think out there, they don't even know what that means. It's a and even I think even MSPs don't know what it means all the time. But for those that don't know, an MSP is a managed service provider. That also is not self-explanatory, but they're your
the,
outsourced IT firm.
Yeah, the way that I kind of explain it, a lot of companies aren't big enough to have like like a full-time person doing IT. So you might have like your savvy office manager or something like that, but she may not understand how to manage a 365 environment or networking gear. And so those smaller firms are going to partner with a managed service provider or a company like that to kind of round out their IT. And then the other piece of it is, you see larger enterprise companies that, maybe they have some really sharp level 3 guys, but those level 3 guys are kind of focused in on this one area and they need some assistance over here. It wasn't uncommon for us to be brought in on 365 or Azure products because the guys that had were great with on-prem infrastructure and didn't have the cloud knowledge.
Yeah, and it's in the same vein as like, when you are a small company, you might outsource your accounting department or your bookkeeping or your legal team, or you're not going to be able to bring in every aspect of running a business in-house. And so it's just part of the puzzle of making businesses function better. And I personally happy to be part of it. And I think you were there too.
Yeah, and then I guess one other thing to touch on, like when you say new generation, I connect with that. And one thing I want to add is new generation doesn't necessarily mean age. You know, there's people that are
But yeah,
30,
absolutely.
30, 40, 50 that are switching up careers and, you
Mhm.
know, they want to look at IT because they want to switch up. You know, for some that's money, for some that's they just want to scratch a different part of their brain, or you know, it looks different from different walks of life. And I think in IT and cybersecurity, we need people from different walks of life.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree with that. And I think that that touches on a lot of the reasons like that I'm in my position now. You and I kind of around the same time kind of flipped our careers upside down,
Yeah,
right? We
yeah. So I mean, I guess to touch on a little bit of background. So I know Bobby from ITDRC. It's a nonprofit at a super high level. Disasters happen at an unfortunately more common rate than it used to be. And we basically come in afterwards and help the community recover with technology and
Mhm.
communications. I met him volunteering there and we kind of kept touch. And I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but in my volunteering there, I'm usually either behind the camera or kind of some of the first ones on scene before there's anybody there. So I think you might have taken the only photo of me like actually doing something at ITDRC.
Well, that's
I
kind
think
of
I
perfect.
think I think everybody else just thinks I'm like a figment that like pops into the chat or something. Because
I love it. And I think that, we man, I think, we've known each other for a while now, but we kinda hit it off immediately. We became instant friends.
yeah,
It helped that we were in the same region. We kinda had
yeah,
the same mindset. I think at the time too, you were the Tennessee state coordinator, and I had just started, and a few months later, I would become the Florida state coordinator. So, we were kinda on the same track. We're around the same age. We kinda did the same thing.
to step away for a second, if I'm educating people, a state coordinator works at the local level when
Yeah.
things happen to help coordinate our recovery efforts. So, you know, we're usually on the ground and, you know, we're already connected with the local governments and the volunteer organizations so that we can provide the quickest and most helpful impact.
Yeah, one of the biggest things we do as state coordinators is kind of be the liaison between the state government and our organization. So that way, when things do come up, there's we know who to contact, we know what to get in touch, who to get in touch with to make sure that like in our case, the Florida Department of Emergency Management, we know exactly who to call, who's in charge. That when they need help, we can be there to support them with Wi-Fi, satellite internet, radio communications, whatever it might be.
I feel like when you see news coverage, it's all the bad, and we get to interact with the people that are doing good in the face of bad.
Yeah.
I think it was Joe or someone put it as, you know, when you're seeing people that are affected, you're seeing them on the worst day of their life. And how can you make that better?
Yeah, absolutely. And Joe is one of our fearless leaders at ITDRC. He always knows how to say things so pointedly.
Yeah.
So the name of my company is Barium Networks, and I'm the owner of an MSP there. But it has nothing to do with the panda bear that is on our logo here at Panda Award Show.
That's true.
So why bears for you?
He looked kind of cute and cuddly, so we just brought him on board. No,
Yeah. Why look like friend if not friend?
so at my first MSP, one of the traditions that they had is you would have like a weekly tech meeting where you would kind of discuss your wins and things you were struggling with, and we would pass a stuffed panda bear. And they would do it based on who kind of showed company values, and you would hold it for a week. So you would get the stuffed panda bear and you would have it for that week, and the next week you picked someone who showed the company values. And actually towards the end of them doing it, so we actually had an Iron Man suit for the panda too, which was kind of cool.
Awesome. I love it. So the panda embodied doing the right thing and making sure that whatever had to be done to service your clients was getting done. I love it. Absolutely love it. I think that that embodies so much about what we do in our jobs. I think the reasons that you and I have excelled in our careers is that we always go above and beyond to make sure that our task isn't just our task. It's seeing the big picture and doing more than just the needful.
And we'll touch on this in another episode, but at a really high level, I kind of picked up the things that people weren't doing. They
Yeah,
had an RMM called
absolutely.
LabTech, and nobody was doing anything with it. They were just using it for VNC, which was a really slow remote control tool. And
What, you
then
don't want a free remote control too? Free's not always good? Is that what you're saying?
but nobody was like scripting or anything. So like I created a simple script, and they're like, "This guy's a genius," and I had just copied it from Google.
That's something I've always been really good at. I have a little bit of programming background or education, but I was never a programmer. But what I was good at was understanding code. So I can take script and know what it's about to do and understand what the language is, but don't ask me to write it because that's what you're I'm gonna get you involved.
I started as a web developer, and I had a gig, like an internship, and I was in this cubicle that had these really tall cubicle walls. They were probably 10 feet and they seemed more like 15 feet. And I was just like in a quiet cubicle, like writing code. And I was like, I don't think I want to do this for the rest of my life. And so, eventually I think that kind of swayed me more towards IT work and things like that.
Gotcha. Okay. I like that. I like that.
And so, yeah, I mean, I guess, we've touched on this a little bit, but kind of who are we? So, who are you? I've seen you a couple times before.
Yeah, I'm your neighborhood friendly brown bear. I am the owner of an MSP in Orlando, Florida called Barium Networks. We do a little bit of everything. We're a pretty new green MSP, but we focus in on your general managed IT services, cybersecurity coming from my background and degree in cybersecurity, and then just all the technology you need to run your business. So, like we
Yeah.
said earlier, that I came from an internal background, but I wanted to be able to impact more companies, more small businesses that needed help, and so started this MSP pretty recently, actually.
Yeah. And I may be putting you a little bit on the spot here, but I know you mentioned wanting to impact businesses. Did you have any personal reasons for wanting to switch over to a business owner? I mean, it's not an easy job, but you looked at it and you're
Yeah,
like, I want to do this.
to put it bluntly, I don't want to do tech anymore.
So you
I mean,
so
I
you picked a
love.
tech a tech company to not do tech anymore.
Yeah, it sounds weird, right? But no, I love technology. I'm good at technology. I understand technology, but it's not what I want to do every day, all the time. And I've always been a little bit of a leader. I've never actually led a business or led a large team, but I was always the one that when we had a group project at school, I'd just be the leader because I'm the one that was seeing the bigger picture and see how to put things together. I took leadership classes when I was 16. And all those things, I still have the book somewhere. I'll have to pull it out for another episode or something. But when I look at training today on like how to be a better this or how to do project management, whatever it might be, so many of the lessons are the exact same lessons I learned when I was, a kid.
Yeah.
And I realized that I have a skill set and I have a passion for leading teams. And so why stick myself only to do technology when it's not something I want to do all the time? I can instead have a company, try to lead that company, try to grow that business, to have a team, have a group of people, nurture them to train them their skills, give them better skills, upskill them, kind of what we're doing with this podcast. And then hopefully it also sets me up to have a lasting business that, my family doesn't have to worry, and then I can set up a legacy for my kids that don't have kids yet. But give me 3 weeks and I'll have one.
Man, we're excited for that too. I bet you guys are
But no,
really
not three
ready at
weeks.
this
Two
point.
2 weeks. I forgot.
My
We're
gosh.
recording this a little bit early. 2 weeks from the time this podcast airs, I will be a father. So I'm really excited for that. And I want more for my daughter than what we have available today. So just trying to
Yeah.
work towards that.
And I forget, have you announced the name yet or anything, or is that gonna
We
be
have not,
okay,
mainly because we also have not picked the name. We have it listed. I have a piece of paper here on my desk that
okay,
has a few names on it, but we haven't
okay.
picked it out yet.
Are you thinking like day of, you're like, that looks like a Sally or something like that? Are you gonna pick a
Something
little
like
bit
that.
before?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
okay.
think it's gonna be like from the three that we have now, slowly we'll dwindle it down to two or one.
This is kind of I don't know if this is a dark joke, but probably a bad joke. But is it kind of like naming a dog where you like see what they respond to or something?
I've been looking into it. There's no legal requirement to give your kid a name, right? Like you don't have to. Now they won't be a part of society, but technically you don't have to,
You probably have to if you want the tax credits and things.
right? But that's just being part of society. If
That's true.
you don't have to. You can homeschool them technically, right? Or it's like what about social security? They don't have to work, right? It's not part of the requirements to be human, but it is a requirement to be part of society.
I think we've bled into the hot take section
Yeah, so
unintentionally.
let's go back a little bit. Ben, I wanted to follow up with your question to me. What do you do? What's your job?
The super high level today, I work at Roost as a lead automation specialist, and I support like the automations they're working on and the platform and help kind of lead and mentor a team of people, some of which are honestly smarter than me in some ways, but
Okay. So you saw a gap at your previous company, you filled that gap, and now you're filling the gap for so many other companies out there.
kind of when I was switching over, I mean, I had probably one of the better MSP scenarios out there. Overall, they treated me well compared to some of the horror stories that I hear. Or, whenever you go to our MSP, there's always some story about everybody being underpaid and not getting any
It is not a
PTO.
litmus test for reality.
Yep. But I was looking for a change up, and there's a guy at Black Hills InfoSec, and he does these live streams on getting like job hunting for hackers is what it's called. I think it's Jason Blanchard. I'm probably gonna mess that up, but and at a super high level, one of the things when I had watched his streams like during COVID and stuff, he said make a list of the top 5 companies that you'd like to work for and start figuring out how to work there. If the company that you're at today is not at the top of the list, what do you need to start doing to be at the one that's at the top of the list? And Rooster was at the top of that list. And so I don't know that I did anything that intentional other than I probably picked up more automation projects than I would the normal. And I started looking for the job openings.
Yeah, what came first? Roost being at the top of that list or you starting to enjoy automation?
So I think that's been one of my career power factors has been automation along the way. So I've dabbled in PowerShell pretty early on, and I think the industry of automation has kind of evolved with time, right? So 10 years ago, like PowerShell was a huge thing. It still is, but there's other ways to be impactful to the organization at a higher scale.
Right. Now, your options aren't just Python and PowerShell. There's so many more
Yeah,
things that you can do out there.
yeah,
Well, that's one area I've struggled with, understanding APIs. I literally learned what an API was in the last 3 or 4 years. I didn't understand what it was for the
that's
longest
fair.
time.
If you're out there, you don't understand application programming interface. I believe is the acronym for it. I might be wrong with that, but I'm pretty sure that's the acronym. And super high level, when you click things on sites that change things on the back end, it's probably using an API. And so there are tools out there that you can sort of orchestrate and tie together those APIs to do bigger things at a better scale than you clicking things all the time.
Yeah, I think when I tried learning about it, it was essentially it's the bridge between 2 applications. So, like, you want QuickBooks to talk to Excel? Well, they don't just talk to each other, they both have to speak a language that they both can understand. So you use an API to tell the other one what to do that tells the other one what something like that, right? Yeah, I mean, I think you and I both have we've worked in tech for a while. How many years have you worked in tech?
Okay.
I always have to do some math.
Yeah. So it depends. If you just want to count like full-time employment working for
No, no.
someone,
I want to know, when was the first time you did something that wasn't just being the neighborhood tech kid?
so something you did for money.
Yeah, or something that's what was the first time you did something that a sysadmin would do?
I mean, a really weird one. When I was 14, my uncle was working at a lawn care company, and they had this really expensive software that was on a failed hard drive. And they didn't have the software key. And if they had like reinstalled it, they'd have to pay another 2 grand or something. And so this
A
was
lot
in
of money
Windows.
for a small company.
Yeah, and I mean, it was kind of cool. Like, it was a 3D modeling software, so you could like recreate the client's yard, and they would like put in bushes
Well,
and stuff and show you what it would
that's
look
neat.
like. And this was back in like, I don't know, 2009 or something. They were doing this.
The good old days.
Yeah, it's somewhere around there. And kind of the first, so like I helped them out with that, and it was Windows XP days, and I figured out every registry key, every folder, and like all the things that were needed for it to work. And I got it copied over to a new install with a good drive, and it actually worked. And they,
Wow.
paid me $50 or whatever. What about yourself?
I know this like as a top of mind always. There's a lot of stuff beforehand, but it was 7th grade, 12 years old. I learned how to image computers so that way the actual IT guy didn't have to do it. He was teaching us. I think technically it'd be like free labor, but we won't go there. We were having fun. I enjoyed it. I have no qualms against who's now a friend, the person that was a tech person there. And she's doing awesome things now. So, really cool to see how their career progressed. But yeah, I learned how to use Alteris, to image a computer remotely, do it. I was putting new RAM in computers, configuring network printers, teaching teachers and students how to do things. I went to a really cool middle school that had a lot of technology. So we were piloting, at the time, this was 2004 or 5 or so. So we were piloting smart boards. And now
Wow.
Smart is a huge company, right?
Yeah.
We were piloting microphones for classroom audio systems, which now is like just the default. People just see that so often.
Yeah. Gone are the days of the transparent sheet projectors and things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Overheads. Yep. Yep. We had a 1-to-1 laptop ratio for each classroom. So we had laptop cards. Now a lot of large school districts have 1-to-1 student ones, but um, I was part of the I ended up being part of the team actually when I was an intern at that school or in that school district,
Yeah.
that
I,
brought us to 1-to-1.
I don't know if you guys call them this, but they would call them cows at our high school, computers on wheels. Yeah.
Oh no, cows for me were always cell sites on wheels. So when AT&T or Verizon come out and set up a large cell tower, set up a cow.
You didn't get to keep the laptops like they do today and stuff. You like maybe got them for a class, and
Yeah.
if it was a core class, like maybe the last student didn't plug it in, and it just dies on you when you're writing your paper.
Yeah. Yeah, those batteries did not last. I think putting late 2000s batteries in the hands of a child is a terrible idea because they have no longevity. Okay, so the reason I asked you that question, um, I wanted to set the stage here for like you've had years of experience. Even though we're pretty young, we've still had 10, 20 years worth each of IT experience or seeing things in the industry. So, if we want to move into our hot takes, what what are some of those crazy things you've seen that kind of set the stage for this podcast? What have you seen out there that we're trying to
I mean, I won't get into politics too much, but I think we're seeing a little bit of a hirer's job market right now. And just a year or two ago, it was, kind of on the techs had the upper hand on everything. And,
Yeah,
right now with kind of, I don't know if it's economic concerns, but we're just not seeing as many new jobs as we were. And that
right.
kind of, that kind of means things are more competitive. And it's a little harder to get a job starting out.
Yeah, yeah. It's we went from, especially during the pandemic, everyone needs a remote worker now. Everyone needs a job, and it's like, well, now we've finally figured out how to. We went through those struggles, and we're equalizing the market, and things are saying, but it's getting harder and harder to get a job. But not it's not getting harder to get a job because there's fewer jobs necessarily out there. In a way, there are, but there's also more workers with those skill sets. So the ratio's off, and the employers they want like stronger candidates, or they're looking for.
I think the people that are looking for a job would strongly prefer to have a remote job, and we're definitely seeing less of those by
Yeah,
quite a bit. And so the
yeah,
jobs that are out there in IT might be a hybrid role where you're in a couple times a week.
yeah, yeah. Actually, a guest that I hope we will have on the podcast at some point. I saw him in an interview. He said he would not hire for a particular part of his company, for a segment of his job. He would not hire remote workers because that team needs to collaborate and work together so much that being in person is vital to their function. It takes a really intelligent person to understand that, so that way they don't just blanket say all remote or all in person, right? There's nuance to it. We'll have to ask him. I'll keep his identity hidden for now. If we can have him on, we'll have to ask him what his nuanced thoughts on that.
Even if you take a little bit less pay, sometimes it's a different quality of life being able to work remotely like that. And there are people that it's going to be too distracting at home. I won't say that everybody should go all remote, but I think I know with mindset, I can. I've been diagnosed with ADHD for a lot of years now, and
I gotta go do that. I think mine's just still undiagnosed.
yeah. I think working at home sometimes. I tell you what, I really liked when I didn't have the option to work from home is sometimes doing the on-site work when I had the opportunity to work on one thing at a time and just knock them out. I loved that
Oh,
too.
yeah. That's really good for that like ADHD brain, being able to focus on something. That
Towards the
really
end of
helps.
my MSP life, I was doing sort of I think I mentioned a little bit earlier in the episode, but kind of the longer travel stuff. And so, I'd fly into California, New York, and I'd go in and swap your entire network. And if you look at my LinkedIn, you'll see
Yeah, I've seen a couple of those.
some of those racks. And those are ones where, yeah, I traveled to another state and took out all the old junk that was cable spaghetti and left them with something that we could manage remotely. And you just left him in a better place.
Nice, nice. It's always. I had a. I was raised as a Boy Scout, and one of the things that still is a real big part of my life is leave no trace, and leave it better than you found it.
Yeah.
Right.
I was gonna say I think I left a little bit of a trace, but I do think I left it better than I found it at least.
Yeah, I mean, there's well, yeah, okay, fair. I like the latter part of what I said. Leave it better than you found.
Yeah. So I'm curious, one, did you have any certifications that really, brought you a lot of value in your career? And
Yeah,
do you think having certs will get you a job today?
sure. Yeah. So I got my A plus CompTIA A plus certification um in 2009. So I was in 11th grade, got it. I was in an IT academy at the school. It was like a magnet program. I was doing all the fun stuff because I liked tech. I was the guy that just wanted to do all this stuff. Uh, we were using test out for training for learning. I was getting like 97% on
Wow.
the what's it called, the practice exam. So I was like, okay, maybe I should go actually sit for the exam, and I did. I got my A plus as a 16-year-old kid.
That's awesome.
I It didn't do anything for me until like 3, 4, 5 years later. I
This is kind of, I may throw you off track here, but was that when you took it, did they still have the lifetime exam
Yes,
for A
I
plus?
I not only took my A plus, it is still my only current certificate, and I got my first IT job out of it. It was Geek Squad. I interviewed for a Geek Squad job, and they saw that I had A plus, and the rest of the interview was all about personal, not technical. And I had that job for 5 months, maybe 6 months. No one has asked him out since. No one. Um, but
So you
so
were, was that about 20 when you got your Geek Squad job, or
yeah, I want to say it was like 2012 or 13, so I would have been around 2021. No, I was not 21. I was 19 or 20. It was before I had a diff. Yeah. So I remember the job that I was at when I turned 21. This was before that.
where did you find the job? Did you seek out Geek Squad or did you see a listing somewhere?
Back then, it was the only thing I knew about IT jobs. Like if I wanted to fix a computer, where do I go get a job? That was the only thing I knew. It helped that Best Buy was really close to my house, so it was an easy
That
commute.
makes it nice. Yeah.
But I was definitely more of a hardware guy than I was networking or software, and that kind of set the stage for me. But the ever since then, like if you just take the name of my company, Barium Networks, I don't hold a networking certificate. I should probably sit for an exam just to do it, but it wasn't the certificate that got me to where I am today. It was just continuously proving worth and having more and more worth on my resume beyond the certificate.
Yeah. I think, kind of like your Best Buy situation, I think the certs can get you the interview. Your knowledge gained from the certs actually gets you hired.
Yeah, I
So
will.
the
I will
people that
say
are
this.
out there doing the brain dumps and stuff like that, you're cheating yourself. You might get the interview and
Absolutely,
then you're in a world of hurt at a lot of
absolutely.
places.
Yeah, it's not just unethical, it's just useless. The one thing that I value in an A plus certification, and if you talk to a lot of IT guys or a lot of people in, like, you think if you talk to a lot of our friends and colleagues, they'll be like, A plus, useless, doesn't do anything, doesn't teach you anything. I was like, but it does a lot. It teaches you how to troubleshoot, it teaches you what to think and how to think about technology. And I think that was the most valuable thing I got from A plus. It wasn't knowing that VGA cable has 9 pins or 15 pins and a serial cable has nine, right? Like that doesn't matter. No one cares in the long run. The big thing was,
Don't plug a serial cable into a VGA port.
if you can make that happen, I'll give you a
I've
dollar.
had a user turn in a computer that was the issue, is they tried using a serial cable as a VGA cable.
A an end user is the person that taught me that a USB A cable, the male end, is the same width as a RJ45 jack. Wow, well, you're like, it does fit. I'll give you that.
Yeah, I've seen phone cables plugged into the RJ45 earlier in my career too.
Yeah. Like, why
Phone
isn't it
lines.
charging? So yeah, and we'll go into this more. I want to, we can dive into it, but I don't think a certification necessarily gets you the job to get the actual technical side of the job. I think it does do a decent job at checking a box and gets past HR, but it doesn't actually teach you how to do the job you're going for.
Yeah, and maybe it depends. It could depend on the certs. Like we're starting to see more I think people are hearing this feedback, and we start seeing more certifications, like especially on the cybersecurity side, where you have to do something to get the cert. Like it's not just question and answer
Yeah.
type of situation.
You have to prove that you've had industry experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tying into this a little bit, I think your answers will be similar, but what about a degree? Do you think you need a degree to get a job in IT?
Well, this is a fun one we'll talk about later as well. I got my degree, my bachelor's degree, 2 years ago, last year, I forget. I don't know. It was that useless to me. I got it just to get it, to finish a task, to prove to myself that I can do it, but it was never what got me my job, and I was able to reach a six-figure salary without a degree. There's more to technology than just education. It's important. I'm a lifelong learner, proud supporter of education, but it is not the only thing.
Yeah, I think so I still don't have a degree today. I've thought about it more in the recent years because I think as you get mid-career, if you want to, and I don't know that I want to, but there's certain like really large enterprises and government jobs that
Mhm.
still have some degree requirements there. But man, it's
But even your IBMs, your Intels, they got rid of the requirement. It used to be big there.
yeah, I was gonna say it's more and more often that I see, bachelor's degree or equivalent work experience. And I think, and to be honest, like I've been on the hiring side at the MSP, and I think people have an expectation that once they finish their IT degree, they're ready to rule the world. But, education at a college level is tricky because there's approved coursework. So it's not uncommon for you to take a networking course at a college and some of the material might be, 3 to 4 years old. Now, a lot of the concepts are still going to apply. It's not changing that often. But I think a lot of your value in a college degree from talking with people that have had them and went the traditional route is frankly, some of the connections you make, like, I mean, and I found some mentors and connections without college, but I've known a lot of people that had their college professor help them get their first job.
Yep.
And I think it does have the opportunity to make you a more rounded person, well-rounded person, depending on, what you do with that time.
Right, and I think that's actually a big, huge reason why a lot of Ivy League schools will give away some of their education for free because it's not necessarily the education that you're paying for at those big schools. It's the people, it's the and networking, all this secondary and tertiary aspects of an education.
Yeah, and I will say this, like, man, when I was just first starting out, I think, or at least early on, Coursera started being a thing, and Harvard was putting out like their IT courses and stuff for free even
Yeah,
back
yeah,
then.
yep.
And I
I
and I
forget the
did.
class. It's CS 300?
Yeah, something right along those lines. They like their computer science classes.
Yeah, that is a amazing class. If anyone listening to this podcast wants to learn more about computer science, the intro to computer science class that Harvard puts out on Coursera, and I think their own thing, super amazing.
And that was it was I think it was Mark Zuckerberg that he would just like audit classes basically. Like he would just show up to the physical conference and attend classes, but you don't get credit for it, but he would just like take the knowledge from it. And if
Yeah, I guess it
finances
worked out for him.
it might have worked out. There's this little lesser known guy, but I think if this Meta AI thing takes off, he might be a little bit more successful. But yeah, I mean, I don't. If you want to go to college, I think that's great and admirable. If you don't have the financial means, I don't think you need to go into a ton of debt if it's not the right thing for you.
Yes, absolutely. There's some really, really good content out there for next to nothing or less than $50 a month. You can, if you put the time, I think that's the most valuable thing that you have as a as a young adult. The most valuable thing you have is time, and if you can dedicate an hour a day to education, you will be miles ahead of so many others out there, and that's just an hour.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Earlier in my career, one thing that I would be told by management is in the IT spaces, I was a little bit weaker on my social skills. And I probably, in some situations still am. But what I would do is I would stay late every night because I had crap internet at home, and I would watch TEDx's and like everything that I could on like human interaction and like ways to like conversate better. To be honest, I probably retained like 5% of it. I couldn't tell you most of it now, but I think there's
Every single episode of This Whole House, I cannot build a bit.
yeah, but I think there's something to be said about like using those resources, and it doesn't have to be technical upskill either. Kind of hit on another point here. When I mentor people that are earlier in their career, I kind of tell them there's different ways to upskill. Everybody focuses on the technical side. The other side that will increase your impact and value to a company is actually that social component in a lot of roles. If you're the level 3 network guy, sure you can be a jerk, but a company might pay you 20 or 30,000 more if you're not a jerk and still know your stuff. Cuz I think everybody's met the stereotypical like CCIE jerk who's like blaming you for the problem that's on the network and stuff, and
It's always the network every time.
it's not the network, guys. But
I
that's
think that's a big thing too, is because you have to remember we're people, we're humans. Your day to day job might be technical in nature, but it's affecting people, and you have to be able to communicate with people in order to.
and it's okay to not be social or extroverted. I'm not an
Yeah.
extrovert. This is me masking. I mean, I still enjoy it, but after this, I might go like zone out and not talk to anybody for a few hours or something like that.
Yeah.
But like it really depends. Like it's okay to not be an extrovert. There are opportunities if you're willing to wear that mask or be that person.
Yeah, and I'm kind of the opposite. I'm definitely more extroverted, but I will gladly say I am not the expert on so many things, and I am not the number one person on a technical subject. I'm good at it, right? I will stand by my rates and what I charge for my services because I know it's worth that. But there's a lot of people that are way smarter than me. But I do like to talk to people. I like to communicate. I like to make friends. I think that's been a really big proponent of my career. It's just being communicative, being there at the right time, and knowing the right people.
100%. I think, and you kind of touched on an aspect on there. Like sometimes it's knowing the right people at the right time. Like nepotism is not a great thing, but I think there are like just befriending someone on LinkedIn that like, like to be honest, like the Roost job offering. If I hadn't added Roost people on LinkedIn, I never would have saw the job posting. It just was never on my radar
Oh
before.
yeah, yeah. For social media, you have to be in the circle in order to see the circle, right? So it's not don't there's a reason that on LinkedIn or even Facebook that I have 1,000+ connections. It's not because I talk to 1,000+ people. It's because that's the only way for you to be visible. You
Yeah.
have to have that network.
Yeah. And I think, along the way, I've made some really deep connection and like friendships with some people just because, they'll post something and like, oh, I kind of know something about that. I do want to go back for a second because you kind of touched on something there about, not knowing everything. Something that I don't know, this probably sounds a little goofy, but something that I had to learn to be okay with in my imposter syndrome is being okay with not knowing everything, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah,
Because I think I think this is a typical problem, but you're in IT and maybe most of your job at MSP is dealing with a network, and then you go to a conference and there's a CCIE there and they know the world, and you're like, well, I'm an idiot who's a fraud, and I've tricked this MSP into hiring me and doing their networking work. But I think
it
there's
sounds like you're talking from firsthand experience because I know
I
I've been there.
I know this guy, and he worked at MSP and defrauded them by tricking them into. But if you're out there and you have that imposter syndrome, I think there's a seat at the table for people that aren't the experts. That's the
Absolutely.
reality of it. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's there's, if you look at any, and the date we're recording this podcast, I think is kind of perfect to what I'm about to say. It's you have to have a really broad and diverse set of skills in order to make anything happen. If you're thinking about any business, the person in the top, the CEO, they have to have really good business acumen, right? They have to know everything there is to know about running a business and how different aspects of the business can affect other aspects. But then, they rely on a really smart group of people. They rely on the CFO, the chief financial officer, that only is really good at finance, but they suck at legal and tech. That's fine, right? That's why you have a chief technology officer, someone who's really good at technology, but may not know everything else. And you have the chief legal officer or head counsel. You might have a chief operating officer, just someone that's running the business and can understand other things, but doesn't know the details. And when you extrapolate from that and you go further and further down a large enterprise chart or an organizational chart, right? Really down the ladder there. Even your bottom of the rung teams, they have to have people that can do so many different tasks. And that team works with other teams, that works with other teams, that works with other teams, and they all do their own thing. But I mean that's a lot of, you have to recognize that and know that you're not going to know everything, because that's why we're a team.
Yeah. And I think that's something that another aspect that I kind of figured out along the way. MSP work's a little bit polarizing. A lot of people either love it or hate it. And I think one of the reasons is you have to be more of a generalist. Like there can be areas of focus, but there's really more of, a mile wide, couple inches deep knowledge
Yeah.
that it can have a greater value than being the expert in one particular thing, especially on smaller teams.
And I mean, I said earlier, I just shouted out that I've seen every episode of This Old House, but I don't know how to build a house.
Yeah.
But I own a house and I have had to paint the walls and I've had to fix the walls. I've had to fix the plumbing. I've had to fix the landscaping. I've had to do electrical work. I've had to do structural work, right? And so it was like I'm that person where I am not an electrician, but I know how to replace a light switch, right? I have that surface level knowledge, which I think helps me in my,
What it is know what you know. And that applies to the house too, right? Like I'll replace a
yeah,
faucet, I'll clean my gutters, but like when it talks about like replacing the gutters or something like that, and like you're on the ladder all day and stuff, like somebody else is gonna do a much more much better job than I am. Or, like like you said, I'll replace an outlet. I probably won't replace the breaker panel by myself. I'd probably
yeah,
involve somebody on that.
right. Yeah, and it's understanding that there's so much depth and nuance to so many different industries that, if working in tech, I think this is something that I've always thought back to is like if you're in tech and MSPs, like you said, you have to specialize or you have to kind of go into a vertical or a niche. But at the end of the day, like tech is tech. If the computer that you use at Google is the same computer that you use at Deloitte, which is the same computer that you use at Walmart. They're all computers. So there's a foundational base understanding and knowledge to how technology works. And then I think what elevates you to have those more specialized careers or higher value careers is understanding the business part or the tiny little details that separate Walmart from, you know, uh, Google, right? They're so similar yet so different.
Yeah, I think to kind of expound on that a little bit, you're touching on a few different things there. So I think, when you're thinking about how technology works, there's a piece to that called critical thinking of like really breaking down a problem and understanding where the issue is.
I'll loop back to my A plus certification. They teach that.
I if if you don't have the A plus, or if you don't, you're not interested in. Mindy Green did a really good talk on it a few years back about critical thinking. There's also a book by Don Jones, who wrote the books on PowerShell and A Month of Lunches, and I think his book is A Lone Wolf in Siberia, and it's a book about troubleshooting. It's about 50 pages. It's a little short read, but it's really good too. But yeah, when you have the critical thinking piece, and then you touched on another thing that I like, that when I was in my internal IT role and when I was in sort of the sales, a little, yeah, there you go. Third edition, baby. Now, have you actually went through it, or is it just on your shelf? And
Both. There's 350 pages. I've probably only read a.
yeah, anybody listening on audio, he's brought out his PowerShell in a month
Oh
of
yeah,
lunches book. Yeah.
Learn Windows PowerShell in a Month of Lunches, third edition by Don Jones and Jeffrey D. Hicks.
Yeah, I have a couple sign. I went to one of his. He did an in-person class. He's a super nice guy.
If you want an insane class on PowerShell, Jeffrey Snover,
Yes.
I mean the father of PowerShell, there, that guy.
Yeah, as you get a little bit deeper, the PowerShell conference puts out a lot of their um like their sessions, and they do some really technical deep dives if you're someone who knows PowerShell and wants to get a little deeper. Um, the other thing I wanted to tie back to is you were talking about understanding the business value. And I think that's some like how a business works. And I think that's something that I had to understand when I went through internal IT and then some in the MSP world as well. But like you can really connect the need to the business. Like that, if you're in MSP sales, that's frankly how you should be selling. Everybody comes out with kind of the commodity MSPs package. Everybody has AV and RMM. Can you sit down, talk with a customer, understand how their business works, and then save them time or money?
Right, right. It's how do you translate tech to business needs, and that goes for any industry, really, right? Like finance is finance, but how do you link the very particulars of finance to how to run this business? And that's something that I'm learning more about. I just had to redo my entire chart of accounts, and I'm working with a bookkeeping company, and they're like, okay, here's the 5 million options you have. Do you need this, or this? And I'm like, I don't think so. It's like, okay, let's go to something else. Like there, it's there's amazing how many options there are, but that's part of understanding the business and how it relates to your
Even at
job.
the core, if you don't understand the business terms, it's shocking and disappointing to me sometimes how few MSP owners don't understand how their clients actually make money. Well,
Yes,
you're like, oh,
absolutely.
they're a printing company or whatever. Well, then you dig in, and this specifically is 80% of our revenue. And when it goes down, we lose $20,000 an hour. We should probably add
Yeah,
some redundancies there.
right. And it is not the job of the owner of that printing company to to know that's what it takes to get to the fix, right? That redundancy, they might not know. They know that they need that to work, but they don't know what it's gonna take to make it work properly. And that's where we come in as like IT professionals.
And they're expecting you to be the expert. So there's some clients that if you don't identify those needs, they're gonna, when it goes down, they're gonna be asking, why didn't you tell me about this?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and I think that happens so often in not just in MSPs, but internal IT and all kinds of IT worlds. Um, it's like it shouldn't be news to you that this is a current event. It shouldn't be news to you that Windows 10 is about to stop being supported, right? End of life comes 3 months from now, right? But we've known that for a while. So you should have planned for this, and you should have known that this is going to happen. And this is a big thing that's like talked about in IT spaces, or in the MSP side at least. It's like planning for equipment replacements. So like you just bought a laptop, it shouldn't be a surprise to you that 5 years later you need a new laptop because they only have a 5-year lifespan or whatever it might be, right? You might be able to get more years out of it, but that's the that's a big part of like the executive side of IT. It's understanding the lifespan, life cycles of devices and services and planning for the future today.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, if I have never had a conversation with my client before about Windows 10 and I come to them in, it's I believe it's October when it goes into life. I come to them in September and say, "Well, hey guys, we got to replace 100 laptops next month." They're going to go, "What the heck, dude? Why didn't you tell us about this earlier?"
Right.
If I can tell them, a year in advance where they can start like planning their money out, where it's not this surprise huge bill, like nobody's happy about that.
Oh yeah. And I think companies are doing the companies that like set these like the Microsoft, Apple, Google, right? They're doing a really good job at setting expectations for how long they are going to support the product. So, like I have a Pixel phone, and I think it gets 7 years of updates, right? So I know that after this, I get this $1,500 phone, bloody expensive, but in 7 years, I can't expect that it is going to be a good phone to have for other reasons, right? 7 years is quite a long time for a compact device, but you have to understand those and acknowledge those details. And if you do, you can have those conversations about the future expectations of your technology department.
Well, Abby, I've really enjoyed our time on this call and everything, and I'm looking forward to the future episodes. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. Do you
Yeah,
have anything else to tell the friends of the internet?
please come back.
Please listen to
No,
our podcast.
I'm really excited not just to like for you and I to chat. This is great. I think it's great as episode 0, just chatting, but I'm really excited for the conversations we're going to have with people that what we can say is they've made it, right? They're at they're in their career, they're doing the thing, they're succeeding. How did they get there? Why did they get there? I'm gonna be just enamored in learning these people's stories.
I've looked at the list of people that have expressed interest, and I mean, I'm excited. I'd love to talk to any one of these people about anything, frankly.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
A
these
lot
are
of them, I could listen to them talk about a broomstick, and they'd make it entertaining somehow.
yeah, and that list that we've and this isn't just a list of people that we want to talk to, right? This is literally a list of people that we have asked and said, "Hey, would you want to be on our podcast?" And they have said yes. And there's people on there that like I've looked up to. There's people there that I idolize, and I'm like, you're the person that teaches me how to do my job, and you want to be on my podcast? Talk about like fandom, right? That's crazy. I think that is that's the best thing about technology and IT. It's like we're all a bunch of nerds. We just want to help each other. We just want to learn more, right? And I love that. I absolutely love it.
Awesome. Well, we'll see you all next week and back here on the Panda Award Show. Thanks all.
Take care, everybody. See you next time.